I believe that we're drawn towards the ocean, towards rivers, lakes, for the same reason that we're drawn towards large canyons and immense mountains. It's the sense of smallness that we get when we encounter these vast natural entities. And I think it's a reminder to us that there is something greater than our individual sense of ego or self. I'm careful not to use the word ego the way it's commonly used as egotistical. We simply mean ego as the I. Ego is Latin for myself, me. Carl Jung described the idea of the persona, coming back to the Latin word mask. Persona, personality, is a mask we wear. It's a performance that we do, and over time it becomes a part of us. And I believe that when we come into contact with the vastness of the ocean or the great plains, anything that brings to our attention that there's something bigger than ourselves, something more powerful, something that can take us in and swallow us, we're confronted with the performance of the self, with the mask. It's not easy being with ourselves. Being alone with ourselves can be a very challenging experience. And we often look to distract ourselves. We come into contact with a certain anxiety when we are alone with ourselves. And we quickly look to our phone or play a mindless game or fall into fantasy of the future or nostalgic past, how great things used to be perhaps, or how wonderful things will be, completely missing out on the moment just to escape what this angst Heidegger described, this boredom. Heidegger claimed that boredom was the essence of being, that when we really felt that absence of intention, we were really alone with ourselves. And he, along with Nietzsche and others, recommended that we actually spend time in that uncomfortable state. But the ocean brings us something different. In these vast mountains, this fear that can be experienced. I remember going to the Alps for the first time to study, and the discussion was the fear. And what the fear was an existential fear. It was coming into contact with the four issues: mortality, so impermanence of the physical self, the ideas of purpose, the ideas of freedom and willful choice, and the idea of meaningfulness, of creating the self rather than finding the self. And these can be very difficult struggles to be faced with. And we often feel when we're in a place deep in the Alps, or when we're floating in the ocean or in the river, we often feel this angst, this fear. Maybe it's even what Sartre described as the nausea. We come into contact with how small we are in context and in comparison of this larger world. Sometimes we get the fear. We don't know what's down there. We're floating in the ocean and we imagine what could be lurking beneath us. Or we're in the Alps, in the mountains, far from civilization. We no longer hear the cars or the planes or any of the signs that we're not alone, and we're forced into this confrontation of our existential self. And then we come to escape that contact by coming up with rational reasons, logical reasons of what we're afraid of. The shark, the complete isolation of not being able to get out of the mountains from the avalanche. Whatever these fears that come up, we throw our existential fears onto these very logical, physical fears. But these fears are symbolic. We're not afraid of the shark. We're afraid of what the shark represents in ourselves. We're not afraid of the snake. We're afraid of the ambiguity and surprise, what the snake represents, the loss of control. So in this way, we seek diversions to get away from our experience of ourselves, distract ourselves. Gadgets and games, company of others. And it takes a very brave individual to be alone with themselves. And we can also be alone together with others, walking with someone, being in the present, being in the here and now, sitting together and looking and watching each other, sitting facing one another and just looking at each other and becoming aware of the intense contact, so intense that we want to look away. But if we truly look at the other and experience the other in full force and full context, we come into contact with them in a way that's refreshing and healing, something that we typically avoid doing. And we can also come into contact with ourselves by silently sitting with ourselves, not allowing our minds to drift to distractions, but just being aware of what we're feeling and thinking. The intense presence of being with ourselves.